Matt Damon is a man who was built through tough times, hard work, and never giving up, and he became one of the biggest stars Hollywood has ever seen. He came from a broken home where money was tight and things were always hard, but he rose up to become an unforgettable actor. Matt Damon is the smart guy who wrote Good Will Hunting. He's the brave Jason Bourne who changed how action movies are made. He's the soldier in Saving Private Ryan who showed the sadness of war. And he's the important person in Oppenheimer who made history feel real. With every movie, he turned his pain into power, his struggles into victories, and his hard work into art. He stood next to other famous actors but shined even brighter than all of them. But even superstars go through blood, sweat, and tears. Behind all that bright fame are painful moments that most people could never handle. The horrible pain of losing people he loved the most. The years of pushing his body way too hard for his movies. And the quiet dark times when all the cheering stopped and he was alone. And now at 55 years old, when everyone thinks he's finally found peace, there's still a storm quietly following him that most people can't see. Matthew Page Damon was born on October 8, 1970 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, a city full of smart people and fancy colleges. But for this little boy, the world already felt broken. His dad, Kent Damon, who worked as a stockbroker, left the family when Matt was only 2 years old. There were no big fights or yelling, just the sound of footsteps walking away down the hallway, a sound that stayed in his heart for years. His mom, Nancy Carlson Page, was a teacher who worked with little kids, and she took her 2 sons, Matt and his brother Kyle, to live in a small shared house with 6 other families. The ceilings were low, the walls were thin, and you could hear everyone else's lives through them at night. Money was really hard to come by, and they had almost no privacy. But Nancy filled the quiet with her steady, warm voice that never broke. At night, she graded papers by a lamp while her sons slept, her tired hands smelling like chalk and coffee, building a stable life out of pure exhaustion. Matt would later say that there was love in their home, but there was also emptiness, and he grew up trying to fill that empty space. That emptiness shaped who he became. At 6 years old, he already knew what it felt like to miss someone, not with anger, but with a deep sadness inside. He watched other kids leave school holding their dad's hands and understood without anyone telling him that something was missing from his life. The lesson was cruel but clear. If life wasn't going to protect him, he would have to protect himself. Nancy taught him that being smart didn't make him better than anyone else. She told him that he wasn't special just for being smart, but that he was responsible for what he did with his brain. Those words became his guide for life. Under her care, using his imagination became a way to survive. Books replaced toys, and ideas became his friends. In that small apartment with the smell of coffee and the sounds of neighbors, Matt learned that thinking deeply could help him escape and build worlds where nothing fell apart. By the time he got to Cambridge Ringe and Latin School, he was still quiet, but something was burning inside him. His drama teacher, Jerry Spica, noticed it, the way Matt would pause before speaking, then pour his whole soul into a single line of acting. For Matt, acting wasn't about getting applause. It was like oxygen, something he needed to breathe. On stage, he could rewrite reality, make broken families whole again, and make sad endings happy. When his friend Ben Affleck started getting bigger acting roles, Matt didn't get jealous. He watched Ben, learned from him, and turned his frustration into fuel to work harder. At 16 years old, he wrote his first short screenplay, not because he wanted to be famous, but because he wanted to imagine a world that didn't hurt so much. Cambridge, with all its professors and poets, could be mean to a boy who didn't have money or status. But he found where he belonged through creating stories. Every time someone told him no, it made him stronger, not bitter, but more disciplined and determined. There were still moments when the old silence came back, when he missed hearing his father's voice or feeling close to someone. But he learned something that would help him for the rest of his life. Pain could be turned into something else, something better. In the smallest spaces of his life, he discovered endless possibilities. The boy who grew up surrounded by 6 families but feeling completely alone would one day stand in front of the whole world, not as someone who lost, but as proof that even from broken beginnings, greatness can rise. He came from silence, but his life became a sound that never fades, a reminder that sometimes the quietest people grow loud enough to move the entire world. Dreams might have saved him as a boy, but the real world was much less kind. The silence that shaped his childhood soon turned into the noise of just trying to survive, a different kind of test that was harsher, colder, and made him hungrier. At Harvard University, where the air seemed thick with ambition and everyone wanted to succeed, Matthew Damon was a young man with an old soul, studying English literature while keeping a secret, a story he couldn't stop writing. It started as a homework assignment written in the margins during long nights at Lowell House, where he shared cramped rooms, thin blankets, and cheap coffee that tasted more like hope than anything else. The smell of instant noodles and burned toast filled the hallways, reminding him that even in a world full of privilege, he was the outsider fighting to belong. That assignment would become the seed of Good Will Hunting, a story about a lost genius looking for connection, written by a young man who was doing exactly the same thing. Outside the classroom, life was far from comfortable. Money was hard to find. His mother couldn't help much, and Damon quietly felt guilty about every dollar that got spent. He took small acting jobs between his college exams, chasing auditions on weekends, hoping one might pay his rent. Dinner was often whatever he and his roommates could find, like half a sandwich split in two or coffee watered down to make it last another night. The heater coughed instead of actually heating the room, and he learned to fall asleep wearing his coat, his breath making fog in the cold room. Some nights when he was exhausted and hungry, he laughed just to keep from falling apart. Still, he refused to stop trying. He told himself that if he didn't risk everything, he'd never find anything worth having. In 1992, just 12 credits away from graduating, Damon made the kind of decision that separates dreamers from doers. He left Harvard to chase a movie role in Geronimo, an American Legend. It was supposed to be his big break, his moment to shine. It wasn't. The film failed. The critics ignored him. And suddenly, the safety net of Harvard was gone. No degree, no backup plan, no money. The applause he imagined never came, only the echo of bills piling up and the voice of doubt whispering that he might have made a huge mistake. He moved to Los Angeles, where dreams were cheaper than rent and way harder to keep alive. The city sparkled and shined, but not for him. Damon and his lifelong friend Ben Affleck shared a rundown apartment where the carpet was worn out, the paint was cracked, and a single light bulb flickered like it was tired too. Their fridge was mostly empty, with milk stretched with water and bread gone stale before they got paid. But their belief in themselves filled the space that food couldn't. They spent nights hunched over an old typewriter, the clicking of keys like their heartbeat, finishing each other's sentences, chasing a story that might save them both. Every rejection letter felt like a bruise, proof that Hollywood didn't care about heart or honesty, only about making money. Some nights they talked about quitting, but then one of them would whisper to keep going and try one more page. During the day, Damon worked odd jobs, delivering scripts, running errands, taking any role that might cover next week's rent. The city's sun was hot, but its coldness toward him was even colder. He sold what little he owned, including the jacket that kept him warm through Boston winters, trading comfort for another month of not giving up. Hollywood didn't care that he went to Harvard. It cared about box office numbers, and he didn't have any. Later, he would say that they were broke, but they had a story, and that's what kept them alive. For nearly 3 years, the two friends survived on caffeine, belief, and a stubborn faith that was almost crazy. Damon learned to turn hunger into discipline and failure into the ability to keep going. The typewriter keys wore smooth under their fingers as they rewrote their script dozens of times, cutting, improving, and protecting it from movie studios who wanted to own it but not believe in it. Every no made him sharper and stronger. Every sleepless night made him quieter but tougher. And then one long night, the kind that had no promise except the next sunrise, they finished it. Good Will Hunting, the story of a boy too smart to believe he was worth loving, written by a man who once felt the same way. It was the story of two friends against the world, one page, one dream, one heartbeat at a time. Out of hunger came discipline. Out of rejection came the strength to endure. Out of cold and emptiness came purpose. And from those sleepless Los Angeles nights rose a voice that would finally be heard, not born from fame, but from faith. The boy who once dreamed in silence had now written a story loud enough to shake the world. Success came like the sun rising after years of darkness, but even the brightest light creates long shadows. For Matt Damon, that light arrived fast, strong, and blinding. In 1997, Good Will Hunting didn't just open doors, it knocked them completely off their hinges. Overnight, the boy from Cambridge became Hollywood's golden child, holding an Oscar in his shaking hands and the weight of everyone's expectations on his shoulders. At just 27 years old, he was living every actor's dream, but the dream came with whispers that were louder than the applause. Some people said he and Ben Affleck didn't really write their script themselves. Others said he was just lucky, another handsome face that Hollywood would use up and forget. The applause was real, but so were the doubts. Fame, he would learn, is a strange kind of storm that lifts you up, dazzles you, and then dares you to stay standing in the wind. He poured himself into Saving Private Ryan, standing beside Tom Hanks and earning his place among legends. Then came the talented Mr. Ripley, a role so dark that even Damon admitted it took him weeks to find his way back to being himself.